My name's Sam Reed, and my wife is Karen. We first crossed paths back in college. She was 21, and I was 23. At the time, I was serving in the military while working on a dual degree in business and finance, while Karen was deep into a biology major. My military duties were unpredictable and often risky, sending me on covert assignments that were more intense than anyone outside of the field would imagine. Our team specialized in complex, high-stakes operations. Essentially, we were the planners and enforcers, with me focusing on strategy and close combat skills. By the time I graduated at 25, I'd served my time, and 2 years later, I left the Army for good to marry Karen. Within a few years, we were raising 2 daughters together. I managed accounting for local businesses and traded stocks from home, while Karen stayed busy with the kids and eventually landed a job at a nearby university lab. After a decade of marriage, both girls were in school, and Karen was ready to return to work full-time, a transition I fully supported. We had settled into my childhood home, a place I'd bought from my parents when they retired to Arizona. My work, along with a bit of extra money from some unofficial military spoils, kept us comfortable, and we decided to enjoy a well-earned night out that February. It was a lively evening. Karen and I, along with our neighborhood friends, went out for dinner and dancing at a popular club. There were 8 of us, all with babysitters lined up, and Karen and I had reserved a room at a hotel adjacent to the club. At 56, Karen looked stunning, slim with dark brown hair, wearing a silky red dress that brought out the warmth in her complexion. We had a great meal, shared a few laughs, and were well into dancing when a group of 6 entered, led by a well-known local football player, Mike Sanders. He was one of the top linebackers in town, and his entrance certainly didn't go unnoticed by the women at our table. He was with a striking blonde, who wore what looked like an oversized engagement ring. Our friend, Sarah, whispered that the woman was a cheerleader for the team and engaged to Sanders. A little while later, Sanders' gaze turned to our table, and without sparing me a glance, he asked Karen to dance. I stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Karen accepted his offer, leaving me standing there. Irritated, I made my way over to the bar and ordered a coffee, watching as Karen swayed through 2 fast dances with him. Then a slow song came on, and she wrapped her arms around Sanders, seemingly lost in the moment. I stayed at the bar, sipping my coffee, while the women at our table exchanged glances, some disapproving, others seemingly entertained. When the song ended, Karen rejoined our table, looking a bit flustered as she sat beside Sarah. I couldn't help myself and made a comment about how much fun they seemed to be having. Sarah brushed it off, saying it was all harmless dancing. Feeling insulted, I took a seat, just as Sarah and Karen excused themselves to head to the restroom. When Sarah returned alone, I immediately asked where Karen had gone, and Sarah mentioned that she'd left with Sanders. Stunned, I rushed outside just in time to see Karen stepping into a shiny black SUV that then drove off. Back at the table, Sarah openly questioned Karen's choices, and I firmly told her to let Karen have her night, making it clear that I no longer cared whether she returned. This declaration shocked the group, and some accused me of overreacting. Frustrated, I told them I was done with the entire bunch of them, seeing as they had witnessed what was happening without giving me a heads up. On my way out, I noticed the blonde woman Sanders had come with sitting by herself, visibly upset. I walked over and quietly asked if she was his fiancée, and she nodded, adding bitterly that he'd promised not to do this anymore, especially now that they were engaged. Apologizing, she mentioned that he would likely bring Karen back by morning. I offered her my business card in case she ever needed anything, and despite her tears, she managed a faint smile. I collected my coat, left Karen's behind, and returned to our hotel room, where I grabbed my belongings and checked out. On the drive home, an idea began to form in my mind. This wasn't the first time betrayal had blindsided me. It was a skill I'd honed during my years in the service. A plan, once put into motion, was rarely left unfinished. Pulling into my garage, I activated the security system and headed into the basement, grabbing a sturdy rope and changing into a black thermal outfit, gray joggers, old sneakers, and gloves. I topped it off with a black hooded sweatshirt and a ski mask. My gear in place, I climbed up to the attic, secured the rope to a beam, and slid out through the narrow window, just as I'd done countless times during my training days. I quickly made my way through the backwoods, slipping over fences until I reached my detached workshop. There, I grabbed a worn backpack, some wool socks, a pink bandana, and an old hatchet from my toolbox. Equipped, I hopped on my mountain bike and headed toward the river, crossing the bridge and winding my way up to Maple Street. I spotted the house with a large statue in the yard and a shiny black SUV parked out front. Carefully, I used the hatchet to shatter the passenger window, setting off the alarm. I hid by the porch until Sanders stormed out, clearly annoyed. He barely had time to react before I struck him twice, leaving him sprawled in the doorway. Slipping back inside, I closed the front door, jogged down the driveway, and ducked behind a wall where I'd stashed my bike. I took out the wool socks, stuffed the hatchet and gloves into my backpack, and pedaled hard, retracing my path down the hill toward the river. Once near the bridge, I stopped and flung the backpack far out into the water, watching it sink into the murky depths below. The river rushed fast that night, swollen from the rain the day before. Watching it for a moment, I tossed my backpack in and turned my bike toward home, weaving through the nearby woods. When I reached my workshop, I went inside, changed into a fresh pair of socks, and swapped my shoes. Then, taking an ammonia solution, I wiped down the bike's handles and pedals, erasing any prints. Jogging back, I hopped over the fence and climbed up the side of the house. It was harder than I remembered, but I managed to pull myself up and slip through the small attic window, where I reeled in the rope. After a quick wipe of the windowsill, I hurried down to the basement. In the basement, I peeled off my clothes, gloves, and mask, tossing everything straight into the washer. In the basement bathroom, I took an extra-long shower, scrubbing every inch thoroughly. Afterward, I threw on a pair of gym shorts and went upstairs, leaving the basement door open so I'd hear when the washer stopped. Mulling over everything, I decided to put on the clothes I'd worn to the club and went back to transfer the freshly washed gear into the dryer. With that done, I made myself a quick snack, poured a shot of whiskey, and settled down, trying to piece together what was next. When the dryer finally buzzed, I folded the clothes, stowed them away, and put the mask back in its hiding spot. The clock read 2:50 a.m. It had been almost 3 hours since I'd walked in the door after the club. I settled onto the couch with another whiskey and soon drifted off. A sudden chime woke me, and checking the door camera, I saw two figures, a black woman and a white guy with a buzz cut. Cops. The doorbell rang again, so I opened it, and they introduced themselves as Detective Price and Detective Logan, showing their badges. Feigning worry, I asked about Karen, hinting at my concern for her well-being. They reassured me she was unharmed, but explained that Mike Sanders had been assaulted. Inviting them inside, I asked where Karen was, and Logan, the male detective, mentioned she was at the hospital, recovering from shock. I took a deep breath, gesturing for them to sit. They chose 2 chairs across from me while I sat back down on the couch. "So, mind filling us in on what happened?" Logan asked. I sighed and nodded, explaining that after Karen left with Sanders, I'd gone back to the hotel, packed up, and headed home. There, I drank enough to knock myself out on the couch until they arrived. They asked if anyone else had been at the house, and I mentioned the kids were with a babysitter. As for calls or emails, I shook my head, saying I'd gone straight to sleep. Detective Price eyed the room and then noted the security system, asking how extensive it was. I offered to show her, leading them up to the office where I sat at the computer and pulled up the security footage from 6 p.m. until they'd arrived. I downloaded the file onto a jump drive and handed it to them, explaining the system monitored the front, side, and back doors, along with the sliding patio door. I clarified that the side facing the woods, where I'd entered, only had 2 large, stationary windows without coverage. Logan said they'd need to take the computer for analysis, which I questioned. He agreed, saying it wouldn't be long, but I insisted on copying the footage to an external drive as well. Once I'd done that, they asked to look around, and I allowed them but insisted they stay with me at all times. They snapped a few photos here and there before finally heading out around 7:10 a.m. As soon as they were gone, I called Karen's parents, Frank and Emily, who lived in the next neighborhood. They were at their lake house, and when I filled them in, Frank was stunned by Karen's actions, but Emily seemed less surprised. She asked if I planned to visit Karen in the hospital, and I told her flatly that I had no intention of seeing her after what she'd done. I admitted that while it was unfortunate Sanders had been attacked, it was out of my hands. I made it clear that when Karen came home, she'd need to stay somewhere else, and I'd arrange for her things. Frank suggested I should move out and let Karen stay in the house, but I stood firm. It was mine, not community property. After the call ended, I reached out to my parents in Florida. They were equally shocked, and my dad mentioned he'd seen a news headline about Sanders being found dead at his house. I wasn't exactly surprised by the news, but didn't let on. Then, the landline rang. It was Sarah, a mutual friend, asking if I knew where Karen was. Word of Sanders' death was already circulating, and Sarah was trying to piece together what had happened. I confirmed to Sarah that Karen was in the hospital, deeply shocked, and admitted that I had no intention of visiting her. Sarah tried to convince me to go, saying Karen needed support, but I made it clear she'd get none from me after what she'd done. Our conversation grew heated, and eventually, Sarah accused me of being heartless before hanging up. Afterward, I showered again, dressed, and picked up the kids from the sitter around 8 a.m. Once we got home, they asked about their mom, and I gently told them she wouldn't be around that day. To keep things normal, I suggested they get ready for their soccer games. We headed to the sports complex for their matches at noon and 1:30. I relaxed on the sidelines, watching them play, and afterward, we stopped for ice cream before heading home. Back home, I checked my phone, which I'd muted earlier. There were several messages waiting. One from Karen's parents, saying she was at St. Mark's Hospital, unable to communicate, and another from a doctor asking me to call. Sarah had also left a message, mentioning that Karen was with the police but refusing to talk to anyone, and she urged me to bring the girls to see their mom. I called the girls into the living room, explaining as gently as possible that their mom was in the hospital, emotionally shaken but physically unharmed. They were confused and asked why. After thinking it over, I told them, "Your mom went to a famous football player's house last night. She made some bad decisions, and then someone attacked him, though she wasn't hurt herself. She must have seen something, and now she's in shock." They seemed hesitant to visit her, but I suggested they get ready, and we'd go together. After that, I called Dr. Laura Thompson, the psychiatrist overseeing Karen's care. Dr. Thompson explained that Karen was deeply traumatized, currently in a catatonic state. She asked if I planned to see her. I told her I was reluctant, but if seeing the girls might help, I'd bring them. She asked if the kids knew about Karen's involvement with the football player, and I said they understood the basics. Dr. Thompson agreed it might be helpful for them to come, so we arranged to meet in room 3 at the hospital in 30 minutes. When we arrived, Dr. Thompson, a soft-spoken woman in her late 30s, met us briefly and then explained to the girls that their mother was in severe shock and disoriented. She gently suggested that their presence might help Karen reconnect. The girls wanted to see her, so I led them to the door and looked in. Karen was sitting in bed, her eyes blankly fixed on a TV playing cartoons. Tentatively, our oldest daughter, Lauren, approached her, gently touching her hand and calling, "Mom?" Our younger daughter, Ella, followed, but Karen didn't respond. Ella began to cry, and I picked her up, comforting her, while Lauren looked at me, worried. I told them softly that we tried and gently guided them out of the room. In the hallway, Lauren asked, "Will she wake up, Dad?" I assured her that Karen would come back to herself eventually. "It might take time," I said, "but she'll be okay." Ella whispered, "What if she doesn't wake up?" I promised her Karen would recover, trying to sound confident, though inside, I wasn't as certain. Dr. Thompson gently added that she'd keep us updated and let us know when Karen showed signs of improvement. We left the hospital, both girls quietly crying on the drive home. Once home, I started cooking eggs and toast, involving the girls in each step to keep their spirits up a bit. We ate together, and afterward, I put on a movie for them to watch in the living room. Meanwhile, I called an old friend, a public defender, to see if he could find out what exactly had happened at Sanders' house after I'd left. While he couldn't get the police reports, he mentioned that ambulance run records might be accessible and offered to help get a copy if possible. About an hour later, he called back, having emailed the ambulance report to me. It revealed disturbing details. I shared the police visit with him, and he assured me that, as long as the security footage showed no one coming or going from my place, I probably didn't need to worry. However, he suggested I have a lawyer on hand in case. Taking his advice, I reached out to a lawyer he recommended. Reading through the report, a sick feeling crept over me. The police had found Karen cradling Sanders' head in her lap, both of them covered in blood. She was wearing only a thin robe, and the ambulance report noted she was chanting, "No," repeatedly in a state of shock. She hadn't answered any questions about the attack before being taken to the hospital, where she'd since been unresponsive. This image haunted me, Karen sitting there, lost in horror. Despite everything, I wondered if she would ever recover from this. I spent part of the weekend researching PTSD and the effects of trauma, especially catatonic shock, which I had read about in passing before. I learned that people usually come out of shock-induced catatonia but may suffer from long-term PTSD, sometimes carrying those scars for years. My lawyer, Joan Drake, scheduled an appointment for Monday morning at 9:30. She even gave me her cell number in case the police contacted me earlier, though Sunday passed quietly without any calls. The girls and I took it easy that day, relaxing around the house as I reassured them that their mom would likely recover, though she might need extra support. I considered how Karen might react to me once she recovered. I doubted she'd seen anything clearly. If she remembered anything at all, it would be a figure in black wearing a mask. Nothing identifiable. After all, she'd never had reason to think I'd be capable of something like that. Monday morning, I dropped the girls off at school, then kept an eye on the local news coverage about Mike Sanders' death. They didn't mention Karen's name yet, though it was public knowledge he'd been with a married woman during the attack. Apparently, a neighbor had called the police after hearing her screaming. So far, no one but the police had connected Karen or me to the incident, but I suspected it wouldn't stay that way. At 9:30, I arrived at Joan Drake's office. She was a sharp-looking woman, maybe 45, with a professional demeanor that made it clear she took my case seriously. Joan reviewed the ambulance report, her expression darkening as she read. I updated her on the condition of the security video and requested my computer's return, explaining I needed it for work. She called the station and left a message for Detective Price about retrieving it. When she hung up, she emphasized I should avoid talking to the police directly and recommended I keep my phone on me to record any unexpected conversations with them. Satisfied with her advice, I left her office to pick up the girls from school in the afternoon. As soon as we got home, they asked if there was any news about their mom. I'd called the doctor earlier, but there hadn't been any significant change. The girls dove into their homework, and later we ordered pizza. Trying to lighten the mood, I joked that if their mom didn't come back soon, I'd have to get serious about learning to cook. The girls laughed, though they knew I wasn't half bad in the kitchen. Later, after Ella had gone upstairs, Lauren, my oldest, looked at me thoughtfully. "Dad, do you think you'll forgive Mom for being with someone else?" I paused, then told her that for now, my main hope was just for her mom to get better. Shortly after, the landline rang. The caller identified himself as Jim Bean from the Tribune. "We have information suggesting it was your wife, Karen, who was with Mike Sanders when he was attacked. Can you confirm that?" He pressed on, but I requested he keep the matter private, citing the potential impact on my daughters. Jim hinted that if more details emerged, they might publish the story regardless. Reluctantly, I confirmed the basics, stressing that any harm to my family from his article would result in legal action against both him and his paper. "This is going to come out, Mr. Reed," he replied firmly. Glancing out the window, I noticed a TV van parked in front of the house with a Channel 7 logo. "Looks like it already has," I said, and ended the call. Within minutes, there was a knock at the door. Checking the camera feed, I saw a young reporter with a microphone standing outside. Over the intercom, I told her to leave. "You're trespassing, and I'll call the police," I warned. She asked, "Is your wife home, Mr. Reed?" I didn't answer, but instead called the local precinct to request assistance in removing the press from my property. Within minutes, officers arrived to disperse the reporters, though their vans remained in the street. Next, I contacted Dr. Thompson, urging her to secure Karen's room at the hospital against any press intrusion. I also discussed possible relocation options with the girls and the idea of switching schools if necessary. However, both girls insisted they wanted to stay in their current school, even if it meant living somewhere else temporarily. I told the girls I'd think over the idea of moving, but first, I reached out to Joan for advice. She suggested issuing a brief statement to the press to help calm things down. Her office released a statement on our behalf, emphasizing our desire for privacy. It mentioned we had no comment on the rumors surrounding my wife, and that no further comments would be made. The statement also warned that continued media presence around our home would be treated as harassment if it disrupted our lives. Soon after, police detectives announced a press conference for 7 p.m. that evening. Watching the conference, I learned a few new details. The police confirmed that Mike Sanders had been attacked with a sharp object outside his home. Although a woman had been inside the house, they stated there was no indication she'd seen the attack, and the investigation was still ongoing. One reporter asked whether the woman was married and if her husband was a suspect. Detective Price remarked that since her identity was common knowledge, it was assumed she was married. He also stated that a thorough investigation had ruled out her husband, as he had an alibi at home. Another reporter brought up Sanders' history with married women, noting rumors that he had caused issues with other marriages. The police acknowledged these claims, hinting they were pursuing additional leads related to Sanders' affairs. With that, the conference ended, leaving the media buzzing. Afterward, I arranged with the girls' school to send their assignments electronically for the week. I also called Karen's parents, Frank and Emily, to warn them about the press, though our street had finally quieted down. On Tuesday, Dr. Thompson called with a positive update. Karen was beginning to respond to those around her, though she was still fragile. She also mentioned the police had spoken with Karen, so I immediately notified her parents. Later, I took the girls to the hospital to visit her. By the time we arrived, the detectives had finished their interview, and Detective Price pulled me aside, asking if I could spare a few minutes to talk. I agreed. Inside the room, Karen looked dazed but managed smiles and hugs for the girls, listening as they told her about the TV trucks and updates from school. Eventually, though, her focus started to fade, and Dr. Thompson suggested she get some rest. While Karen's parents kept the girls occupied, Detective Price and I stepped aside to talk. "She seems to be improving," Price remarked. "Maybe," I replied, "but I'm not sure." He asked if I intended to bring her back home until she fully recovered. I explained that while I would support her, we'd be separated once she was stable. Price raised an eyebrow, suggesting I should go easy on her, given what she'd been through. I made it clear it wasn't about punishing her but about respect and trust, both of which had been broken. I doubted I'd ever trust her again. Price gave me a wry smile, hinting that Karen might fear me, saying she might not trust me either. When I countered that I had been cleared, he noted my military background and commented that a regular guy might not have pulled off such an attack, but maybe I could have. I brushed it off, emphasizing that my home security footage proved my innocence. Price nodded, but before leaving, he offered a veiled, "I'll be seeing you around." Over the next few days, Karen continued to show small signs of improvement. I took the girls to visit her each day, though I didn't linger in the room. Finally, on Thursday, she was set to be discharged. She requested a private conversation, so I sent the girls out of the room. Karen started by apologizing, admitting she knew she'd humiliated me publicly. She expressed a desire to come back home for the girls' sake and mentioned sneaking out of the hospital to avoid the media. I gave her a long look and replied that sneaking out was something she was good at. She didn't meet my eyes, mumbling that she'd check with hospital security. I admitted that although I had no desire to be near her, it didn't mean for her to get hurt. Then, I asked directly if she and Sanders had been intimate. Karen claimed they were only undressed in bed when the commotion began, but the look in her eyes told me she wasn't being honest. I made it clear that trusting her again wasn't possible, though I said we'd take things one day at a time. Despite everything, I told her I still cared for her, then walked out to make arrangements. After speaking with the hospital security team, I arranged for a car to pick her up from a discreet exit at 4 p.m. By 4:45, Karen arrived home. The girls were thrilled to see her, and her parents had come over to lend support. I'd set up a bed in my office, leaving Karen to sleep in our old bedroom. The atmosphere that evening was tense. Karen, her mom, and the girls gathered in the living room to play Monopoly, while her dad and I talked on the patio. "So, what are you planning to do?" Frank asked, his voice low. I sighed. "I don't really know," I admitted. "But if I had to guess, I'd say we're done." Frank tried to encourage me to consider forgiveness, reminding me of the years of love Karen and I had shared and the family we'd built together. But I had my doubts, particularly because Karen had claimed we'd lost intimacy. Frank seemed troubled, admitting he struggled with her reasoning, especially since he'd always seen us as close. I suggested there could be health concerns if protection hadn't been used and mentioned possible consequences, like diseases or even pregnancy. Frank grimaced, not liking the thought, but agreeing to let Karen stay for now. Still, he advised me to find a more permanent solution soon. We went back inside, shared some pizza, and eventually, Karen's parents left. As far as I knew, they hadn't discussed the situation with her. Later, when I was tucking the girls into bed, Lauren asked Karen directly why she'd gone off with Mike. Karen apologized, admitting she'd made a terrible mistake. Lauren, confused, said, "But he wasn't Dad," and Karen promised they'd talk more once she understood everything herself. The girls went to bed, and Karen headed to the kitchen. After about 10 minutes, I joined her and made a call to my public defender friend to ask about the autopsy report. He confirmed it was a public document and said he'd get it for me. Meanwhile, Karen, sipping a soda, asked if I'd be sleeping in our room. I told her no, I'd be in the office. She said I was welcome back anytime, but we both understood the uncertainty in our future. I expressed skepticism, and she suggested we try to be patient, reminding me it had all happened in just the past week. I went up to the office and eventually drifted off but woke early at 5 a.m., groggy but unable to fall back asleep. I made coffee, and soon after, my friend sent me the autopsy report. I read it carefully, focusing on the details of the injuries and other evidence. What I saw left no doubt. There were traces of both male and female fluids on Sanders, confirming that Karen had been intimate with him despite her denials. My suspicions solidified, knowing she'd been at his house for nearly 2 hours before the attack. When Karen came downstairs, we got the girls ready for school as usual, though they were noticeably subdued. On the drive back, I mulled over the reality of our situation. Had it not been for Karen's illness, I wouldn't have allowed her back into the house. Still, keeping her here made things more manageable for the girls, at least for now. Just as I stepped inside, another TV van pulled up out front, and a young reporter jumped out, calling out questions about Karen and whether I'd forgiven her. I gave a wave and told her to stay off the property before heading back inside. Karen had made some biscuits and offered me one. She commented on the TV van outside, wondering aloud if they knew she was home and suggesting they might move on soon. I asked her what they wanted, pointing out that the press had already spread plenty about me and my actions at Sanders' place. She hesitated, then asked if they could make things worse. They probably could, I admitted, looking at her. Sensing my frustration, she asked if I meant worse in terms of her or us. I clarified that I wanted her to write down everything that happened that night, starting from when she left the club and ending at the hospital. She nodded, agreeing to try, though she mentioned it might be hard to revisit it all. She also said she'd need to call her workplace to see if she still had a job. Surprised, I asked why her job would be at risk just because of what happened between us. She explained that she'd been gone a week and called her manager, who allowed her to take the time as sick leave, with the following week covered as vacation. Karen then went upstairs to her room, laptop in hand, to start writing. I let her be and returned to my office to examine the autopsy material further, waiting for test results, which might take a few days. Karen tried to act normal over the next couple of days, though I could tell she must have had her own questions about the night. Finally, the remaining test results arrived. They confirmed her DNA among the samples, proving once and for all that she had been intimate with Sanders. I waited for her account of that night, knowing I couldn't go on with her as my wife. The next evening, after dinner, Karen came into my office with a printout in hand. "I finished writing," she said softly, handing it to me. I sat down to read. Karen's account began with an apology and regret for her weakness. She admitted that she'd felt thrilled and captivated when Mike had asked her to dance, given his charm and reputation. When the slow song started, she found herself drawn to him, caught up in the moment. She wrote that when the dance ended and I wasn't at the table, she arranged with Sarah to go to the restroom. Karen could see the anger in my eyes but thought, somehow, I'd get over it in time. Wanting to be with Mike, she went out the side door with him, and they drove to his house. Once there, Mike kissed her, carried her upstairs, and they ended up in his bed. Afterward, she admitted to helping him clean up and engaging in more intimacy, but they were interrupted by a car alarm outside. Mike left her in the bedroom, telling her to wait. When she looked out the window, she could barely see over the porch roof, but caught a glimpse of someone in black running away, jumping over a fence. Pulling on a robe, she went to the front door and saw Mike lying there with his head bashed in. She said guilt and shame washed over her as the police arrived, eventually leading to her ending up in the hospital. She apologized for everything, saying she still loved me but didn't understand her own actions. When I looked up from reading her account, Karen was standing there, tears streaming down her face. She asked me directly, "Were you the person I saw?" I told her that I'd been at home all night, drinking and mourning what I knew was the end of our marriage and the changes coming for our family. I admitted I'd been furious, but I reminded her that the police had confirmed my presence at home with security footage. She nodded, but I cut her off, stating that Mike had deserved what he got. She looked taken aback, saying Mike didn't deserve to die and that he'd been kind to her, even saying he'd impacted her life. I told her we didn't need to get into that, but I made it clear I could never love her again, probably not even in the smallest way. The person I thought I'd married would never have done this, I said, finally asking her if the night with Mike was worth what we'd lost. She admitted that while the night was intense, it hadn't been worth the fallout. Reflecting, I wondered if I'd have come home the next day feeling better if things had gone differently, but with Mike dead, I felt broken beyond repair. Karen accused me of being involved and abruptly ran out of the room. Under my breath, I muttered that she'd killed him herself. After that, our relationship turned ice cold. I decided not to try to convince her of my innocence, nor would I put any energy into repairing things between us. I also resolved never to confess the truth to her, figuring that if I did, she'd go straight to the authorities. She had already hinted that, had Mike not been killed, she'd have been willing to face the consequences of that night. It was enough for me. A few weeks later, I filed for divorce, requesting custody of the kids so they could stay in the house. Karen still had her job, so I didn't ask for alimony, nor did I request child support, allowing liberal visitation instead. Karen had recovered enough that I insisted she move out, and she went to stay with her parents. I had her served there, and shortly after, Frank called, asking me to reconsider the divorce. He told me Karen was devastated. I replied that she deserved to be and advised him to tell her to get a lawyer. He was angry, though I wasn't sure if his frustration was directed at me or her. He asked about visitation, and I informed him that Karen could visit any time in the evening and stay until the kids went to bed. The next evening, Karen arrived around 5 o'clock. I'd made macaroni and cheese, and we sat down to dinner with the girls. Afterward, we played board games, and once the kids were in bed, Karen asked if we could talk. I declined, but she insisted we needed to work things out for the girls' sake, pointing out they'd have to adjust to us being apart. She suggested finding a place nearby where they could visit her, saying that sorting out the divorce quickly would give us all stability. She pleaded for forgiveness, expressing deep regret for her mistake and her love. I told her that staying married was impossible after she'd openly betrayed me with that man, and it was time for us both to move on. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I was resolute. Our marriage was over. The divorce went through, and we worked out a joint custody arrangement. Karen rented an apartment nearby with a second bedroom for the girls. We established a civil but distant relationship focused solely on co-parenting. After about 4 months, I started dating again. Word had gotten around that I was unattached, and I found myself getting attention from several women, both in our social circle and at work. When Karen had the girls, I occasionally brought dates home. None of these relationships lasted very long, but the experiences were enjoyable. I avoided any involvement with married women. After everything, it felt wrong. Karen, on the other hand, struggled alone. She took antidepressants and seemed to be sleeping a lot, though she managed to keep her job. Her parents and the girls mentioned that she wasn't dating anyone. 10 years later, Ella left for college, and Lauren was heading into her junior year. They both adjusted well to our custody arrangement and had healthy social lives. By this point, I'd been in a long-term relationship with Cody, a younger woman I met one night at a bar. Like me, she was divorced, with twin high schoolers at home. We clicked instantly. Eventually, she and I moved in together, bringing some new stability into both our lives. I was genuinely in love with Cody. She was lively, intelligent, and we had a great connection, both in and out of the bedroom. While she may not have had the same striking looks as Karen, she had a natural beauty that drew attention when we went out together. Early in our relationship, I'd filled her in on the media frenzy surrounding Mike Sanders' death without going into details about how he died. Eventually, the publicity faded, and no one was ever charged or arrested. Then, one Saturday, Detective Logan showed up unexpectedly at my house. I was home alone, so I invited him in, surprised by the visit. He told me he'd recently retired and was pleased with his pension. I congratulated him, then asked what brought him by. Logan admitted he was convinced I had been the one who dealt with Sanders, adding with a smirk that, in his view, Sanders deserved it, though maybe not Karen. I denied having any involvement, and Logan nodded, remarking that whoever did it had done a commendable job. Curious, I asked why he thought Karen didn't deserve to pay a price for her actions. Logan shrugged, explaining that it was just one night, and that Karen had done what many married women might do if someone pursued them. If it had been a discreet affair, he suggested, maybe we could have moved past it. But the public nature of it all, he said, was too humiliating. When I asked about his old partner, Detective Price, he mentioned she'd been promoted to captain and was making strides in her career. We shook hands, and he left, leaving me with a strange sense of closure. As for Karen, she eventually recovered somewhat, though it was clear she was never fully the same. Once, when I was driving Ella to college, Karen rode along for the trip. On the way back, I asked how she was doing. She told me she was okay and had started seeing someone, more of a casual relationship. I shared that Cody and I were solid, and we were considering moving in together once her kids finished school. Karen whispered that she wished none of it had happened, saying she regretted the lost chance for us to become empty nesters together and finally have some time to enjoy life as a couple. She apologized, and before I knew it, we were both quietly crying, mourning what had been and what could have been. After that, Karen moved into a friend's apartment, but I doubted she ever fully healed from the events of that night. I wasn't sure I had either. In the end, though, I never regretted what happened to Sanders. In my mind, his downfall might have saved other marriages from his predatory ways. A strange, unintended kind of justice, perhaps.